as well. It was the marathon scene at the weekend where the friend of Rob Burrows carried him over the finishing line. It really did touch me, of course, for motor neuron disease, awful, cruel disease. And it was just a heartwarming image. If you haven't seen that footage, I implore you to check it out, because huge respect for all of them, quite frankly, the work they're doing to raise awareness of that condition. I wish them all the very best.
Here, Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Hey, pause, everybody. Look at this. We're getting off. We're starting the show off agreeing, Joe.
No, but that is amazing. I mean, that is... And I think it's Kevin Seinfeld, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who has done so much to raise hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's really moving.
I know, and it is just such an incredible story. I mean, there's been documentaries and things done on Rob and his family, and they're just such an incredible family. His kids came out to the line, his wife did it as well, and it's just so heartwarming. I'll shut up because I'll burst into tears. I'm so rubbish at stuff like this, honestly, I'll cry.
It's friendship, isn't it?
It is. It's friendship. It's such an important matter, and we all fall out politically and disagree with some of the stuff, and lots of us struggle in life and all the rest of it, and sometimes you see something, it stops you in your tracks and just makes you kind of reflect on life. Anyway, so proud of all of them, and I think they're doing great work in raising awareness as well. Right, let's talk politics though, shall we? Let's move on. If you'll indulge me with that. The Home Secretary, Suella, of course, she's been speaking at the National Conservatism Conference. It's a big get-together here in London. It was opened this morning by Jacob Rees-Mogg. He was criticising the government, basically, for not being ambitious enough on Brexit. He went into childcare as well, saying that the extended provisions in the last budget are so-called anti-conservative. Connor, you was actually there at that conference.
Yeah, I've come fresh from it, yeah.
What was you doing there?
Just
speaking,
observing. No, having a chat, yeah. Enjoying all the guests. I have a couple of friends in the sphere who were on panels, so they actually got a very warm reception compared to Suella Braverman's. So it was quite interesting to watch. The first half of the day, it was opened by Miriam Cates as well, who is pretty much from my side of the sphere, backbencher of the year, particularly her recent proposal to say we should empower mothers to be able to stay at home and give their kids the best quality of life. And that's what she was hitting on. And then it went from that to a discussion about Britain in the biopolitical age and how we are increasingly seeing the state intervene in our lives to give us more and more in terms of benefits, but make us less connected to each other, atomising ourselves from a sense of community. And undergirding all of that was the idea that liberalism has gone too far. That was pretty much everyone's opinion, that they've promised us material prosperity, but our lives have less meaning than ever. Came back after the break, Suella Braverman came in, and I don't want to say she went down like a cup of cold sick, because that was a bit severe, but she starts...
She's as bad as my cup of tea that someone brought me earlier on. If you'd have heard me whinging about that.
I think she had slight more strength than that, particularly when dealing with the protesters. But she came off, and off the bat, she was talking about how conservatism in Britain means equality of opportunity, liberal values, and that we speak to a kind of universal sense of what being a human being really is. And it...
What's wrong with that?
Because it's not conservatism, it's liberalism.
Right.
And what's happened is people have said, OK, more liberalism is not the answer to the problems that liberalism has created. And that was the
So you're saying Suella Braverman's not Tory enough?
Yeah.
Cool, blimey. Joe, your thoughts?
Well, I think let's put this into context first, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is it's not a Conservative Party conference.
No.
It's run by an American think tank, the Edmund Burke Institute, and a lot of this sort of quite religious, Christian, fundamental, the Miriam Coates stuff, Jacob Rees-Mogg suggesting maybe that, women should stay at home and look after their children rather than use childcare, and Miriam Cates going on about sex education in schools. It's fine. If I was running the Conservative Party, which is pretty unlikely, having done so disastrously badly in the local elections, I'd actually want to sit down with my party, my members, my colleagues, and say, right, what are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? Because clearly they're not getting through to the electorate, or they certainly weren't in the local elections, and they keep reheating and rehashing things that aren't really policies, they're just random things, cultural wars, wars on woke, Suella Braverman talking about immigration, yet again.
But those things are you'll call them like random issues, they are very important to a lot of people.
What? Sorry, hang on, you're speaking outside the base, though. Like, you don't actually know what the Conservative base care about, and that is the primary issue.
The Conservative base gave us Liz Truss, which cost all of us an awful lot of money.
Okay, that's just not true, though, because
Liz
Truss was not solely responsible for the economic crash. The bond market was about to collapse right before it happened, and they blamed it on the 1% tax cut.
was voted in by Conservative members.
As opposed to Rishi Sunak.
Well, he was voted in by Tory Conservative MPs.
Yeah, because the membership.
But the point is, you look at the results in Dover, for instance, which is at the front line of the small boats, that area, same as Thanet. Craig McKinley was on Patrick's programme just a little while ago. Those places both voted out Conservative councils and voted in Labour. It is not what people are talking about on the doorstep. So what I'm saying, and you're right...
But what was the turnout?
That's what I was about to say, because about 6 in 10 voters for Boris
I don't know.
have not
Off
voted
the
for
top of my
Conservative.
head, I don't know, Michelle, but I think it was around about 30%, which is about average for local elections. But you're right up to a point, Conor, that yes, it is Conservative members, but that's why I think they shouldn't be doing it in public, because I don't think this is helping them. You know, have a conference, by all means, discuss all these ideas. All political parties do, think tanks do. You know, there are conferences like this all over the place. I shall be at one in June in York. You know, there are lots of places for these things, but I think everything is so very toxic, and what I think we're seeing is a manoeuvring as to who's going to take over from Rishi Sunak.
Well, you was there. Do you think it was toxic?
No, it was very constructive, actually. And I think the reason you think it's toxic is because for the last 30, 40 years, there's been a neoliberal Blairite consensus paradigm where we're moving in one direction, and both parties have bought onto it. They're just arguing over the speed of travel. That's why within the tent, and even among some of the MPs, they were saying our party's pretty much indistinguishable from the Labour Party in terms of where we want to go. It's just how much we want to spend getting there. And so I'm not surprised that you think that this is inappropriate or toxic, because you're part of that consensus. The people that are at that conference want a radically different view.
You don't know what I'm part of, actually.
Well, you're formerly Liberal Democrat, right?
I was, yes. I'm not a member of the Conservative
Party. But you're saying,
Party
for example, that immigration and the culture wars are not chief concerns, whereas
they're not.
For us, they definitely are.
But for you, within a small part of the Conservative Party...
I think you overstate how small it actually is, and I think that's why many people are checking out for politics, because they don't feel substantially represented by the members that are in Westminster.
But what's happening is that this is not helping the Conservative Party by seeing, you know, whether this is a move further to the right, who can be more right-wing than the next lot.
Well, can I check, what do you call right-wing? Because what we were just talking about a second ago is incentivising family units. We were talking about people doing entry-level jobs in some cases when perhaps they're currently not incentivised to go out and work. So those kind of things, managing your borders. What do you determine to be right-wing?
Well, I think things like, you know, extending childcare and saying that's anti-conservative.
But wasn't he saying...
Because, so what you're doing, specifically for Jeremy Hunt, is you're making it so that motherhood is an enterprise that must register on the state's GDP balance sheet. Because no money's changing hands, it means the graph doesn't go up year on year. And because they can't actually incentivise families, because mass immigration has pushed down reasons for innovation in technology, we're not actually getting proper sustainable economic growth. So instead they're trying to bring more and more enterprises in the things that they can put on a sheet. And it's not conservative, because it doesn't say, OK, what's best for the child? It says, what's best for the government and their spreadsheets.
Right. So what do you think, that women should stay at home and look after children?
Yes. That's
really?
If they have the children,
Do you know what? We're in 2023.
I don't care about current year. I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't... It doesn't matter.
And this is what's worrying, that this is this American imported...
It's not an American import. Hang on. You've got
no. Fundamentalist, stay-at-home, motherhood
whatever you like, but
pie.
the burden of proof is on you, because the mass daycare industry is a recent innovation versus how human beings have been biologically and historically raised. And what's best for the child... Great example. There's a meta-analysis...
Do you have children?
Not yet. I'd really love to. I really would.
And you'll expect your partner, if she's a woman, to stay at home and look after the children?
The partner I would pick would want to stay at home with the children.
Would they? OK.
Yes.
Michelle, you and I should go home, because clearly we shouldn't...
I'm not saying women shouldn't work
hang on, because that's not what he said, and I do just want to come in here. So I'm a mum of a 2-year-old, my viewers know this, and I work full-time, and I want to work. It doesn't make me less committed to my son. I'm a very committed and loving mum, and that's my choice. But I do recognise, actually, that there are a collection of women that want to stay at home. And I do think, actually, that as woman, you know, I am a youngish woman. I'm not as young as you, but I'm a youngish woman. And I do think there's part of my generation that has been sold, you're equals, you can go work, you can put off having your kids until you're in your 40s. And then you've got this whole collection of women that have gone out there, they've strived to be equal to men. And now it's catching up with them because they're hitting their 40s, they can't get pregnant, they're struggling. Yeah. So I do think, actually, sometimes, particularly religion, I'm not religious for the record, so I don't want to mischaracterise myself, but I do feel a little bit like traditional Christian values, traditional family units, they are like looked down on a little bit, almost for this poisoned chalice of equality and all of the rest of it. So I'm keen that we don't kind of dumb down one side of it in order to elevate it, because they're all different.
No,
right?
and I completely take the point, and people should have the choice, but they shouldn't be prevented from having that choice. And
But are you seeking to prevent? So if I was, I mean, I'm not going to marry you. Sorry to break your heart, and I'm sure you can marry me.
Utterly gutted.
But if I was married to you and I said to you, actually, I've got this great opportunity presented to myself, and I want to go out and fulfil it, would you be saying to me as your wife, no, stay home and raise your child?
I would hope that you would want to stay home and raise the children more. So a great example as to why, there's a meta-analysis in Science, I can't remember which magazine it might. Science, check me, I'll post it afterwards on Twitter. They looked at blood cortisol rates for children who were raised at home with their parents, or the daycare they were put in with their grandparents. It was only part-time.
Where was this study done, and over how many years and how many children?
It was a meta-analysis. I'll post the link afterwards, right? So just off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact number. But they looked at a bunch of different countries and daycare settings, and they found that blood cortisol levels for children that were put in daycare from early childhood, their rates of stress hormone remained high throughout their adolescence, whereas the rate where babies were kept at home dropped over the course of the day because they had close contact with their mother specifically. It's just small things like that people don't think of.
Then how is it that we are, and we've discussed this on this programme before, how is it that we know for a fact that young children, little children who were kept away from nurseries and interaction during COVID and lockdown are now really struggling, not just at school in reception, but also in the daycare, the nursery setting, because they haven't been sharing, they haven't been interacting, they haven't been touching people. So that doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
I can answer that.
But the other thing is...
Let him answer that one.
But the other thing about childcare is that most people cannot afford to pay a mortgage or rent on just one salary.
I agree. The entire economic system is terrible at the moment, and it disincentivises you having a family. That's why about 80% of the women who are childless by the time they cannot have them actually said they wanted children at one point in their life, but they never found the right partner, or the economics never lined up. It's not because of infertility or them not wanting children. So all the economics incentives are against it, particularly for my generation. It's awful. On the first point, part of the reason of that is because we've outsourced for so long the ability for parents to raise their children and also educate them because of the state education system. Most parents are not equipped to homeschool, that lots of parents dropped the ball and they didn't feel they were capable of providing the same level of education as a strict curriculum. So, of course, it's going to be difficult for parents now, who have learned a completely different way, to go from sticking their kids in a nursery to try and raise them at home. But that's still the optimum environment.
Well, I'm going to let you have the final say at home. What do you think? And also, by the way, when we talk about child development, I'm itching because I do have to go to break, but I can't not get it off my chest. I think what people did to children during COVID was shameful. And it wasn't just the closure of nurseries. It was the removal of pretty much everything, all your social activities. If you was engaging with healthcare professionals, I mean, good luck if you even managed to get your hands on one of those. But if you did, they had these stupid masks over their face, interacting with babies and toddlers where you couldn't even see their face. I think it's absolutely shameful what we did in terms of child development during those COVID years. Anyway, don't get me started. Any viewers, regular viewers, will know my thoughts on it all.